today, and I'll be making this receiving blanket. It's called a self-binding receiving blanket, but basically it's more of a self-border receiving blanket. You use 2 pieces of flannel, and the back piece you cut larger and it pulls around to the front and creates this border with these beautiful mitered corners. So let's get started and I'll show you how to make it. You need to cut 1 piece of fabric 40 inches square, and this will become the back and the borders. And for the top of the blanket, you'll need to cut 1 square at 30 inches. Fold your backing fabric in half, right sides together. And here the most important thing is to line up the edge and the top as evenly as possible so you get an accurate fold right in the middle. Mark your fold line with your fingers. You can give it a little finger press, or I have this roller from Violet Craft, a little seam roller, and I'll just roll it, and that'll make a nice crisp fold line. You can also take it to the iron if you want and give it a press. Now open it up. And there's my fold line, and I'll just stick a pin right on that line. I've refolded, and now I'll find the center of my next side. You'll be finding the center of each of the 4 sides of your square. Again, I just rolled it. I'll open my fabric and place a pin right at my fold line. And I'll repeat that with the other 2 sides of my square. Now I'll find the center of each of the 4 sides of my top fabric. I've folded it this time right side out, wrong sides together. I've lined up my edges again, and I'll roll it at my fold line. And again, open the fabric. And pin at my line. And repeat that on the other 3 sides. Now place your top fabric right sides together with the back fabric and begin with any of the 4 sides. All you're doing is simply lining up your fold marks. Now I'll remove my pins so you can get a look here. I'll bring the camera in closer. You can see this fold line right here. And then the fold line on my top fabric is here. And because of the way we folded and pressed, these 2 lines will nestle right into each other and make it very easy to match up the fold lines. Now I'll align the top, matching the fold lines, and give it a pin. There's my pin in the center. You can see there's backing fabric showing on each side behind the top fabric. Now I'll pull it up so you can see the bottom. Now I'll simply pull my top fabric down to meet the bottom of my bottom fabric. I have my pins, I have my fold lines. I'll remove my pins. Again, nestle up those fold lines and pin in place. Now I'll flip the blanket around and do the other 2 sides exactly the same way. Just pull my top fabric down, nestle up, and give it a pin. My 4th side, and I know these fold lines are really difficult to see on camera, but nestle and pin. Now I'll mark 1/4 of an inch from each edge of my top fabric on the wrong side of it. So I have this little ruler, and I'm just lining it up at 1/4 across the top and the side. And I'm using a mechanical pencil. You can even use a pen here because it's not going to show. And I'll repeat that on the other 3 corners. Now I'll pin the 2 layers together, right sides together. My first edge, I will leave a gap unsewn for turning right side out. So I'll just mark that with a couple of double pins. So I won't sew between here and here. And I will pin the opposite side. Okay, I already have my center pin, and I just like to make sure this is nice and smooth, and place a few pins. Pull it down. Now I have 2 opposite sides pinned. Now I'll do the other 2 sides. I have my pin here in the middle to guide me. I'll line up the top fabric with the bottom fabric again, just like I did before. And pin across here. And again, I'm simply pulling this top fabric up to meet the bottom fabric. And I just make sure it's nice and flat, and then you'll see, let me pull this over, you have kind of a messy looking corner here. So just the best you can, just continue lining up. And then that's what it looks like. And I'll flip it around and finish pinning my final side. I'll just do exactly as I did before. Line up, pin from here to my corner on each side of my pin. I'll take it to the machine. I'll use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'll start sewing at my mark, my pencil line. So that's where I'll begin stitching. I'll leave this little 1/4 inch free from sewing all along here, and then I'll sew right into this pencil line, not going beyond that. Okay, I'll begin again 1/4 inch seam. Here's my area I've marked on the end, my 1/4 inch that I do not want to sew in. So I'll just place my needle right on this side of it, the best I can. And I'll just do a couple stitches and then back stitch to tack down. And this is not my side where I want to leave a gap, so I'll just go ahead and stitch all the way down. Just line it up the best I can as I go. Up to my other end with my 1/4 inch drawn lines. Try to keep it lined up the best I can. So one more stitch, good, and then I'll back stitch and then forward and cut off. And you can see, I don't know, the camera probably can't pick that up, but I went right up to the line with my stitches. Next, I'll turn it around and sew the opposite side of the blanket. And now I want to begin again at my pencil mark, 1/4 inch all the way down, and I just kind of fold this out of the way, this floppy corner, and I just concentrate on making sure these 2 are lined up. Place it under the needle. Again, do my best to actually raise my presser foot to the highest position, and then I can really see where my needle placement is. That looks good. Again, back stitch. And I'm coming up to my corner again. So I'll line it up. And I just, again, make sure everything's flat under there. I can feel it with my fingers. Over a little bit more. And I'm going right up to my, wants to get out of alignment on me. So I'll go right up to my pencil mark, back stitch, coming up to my double pins, tie off. And again, I'll start down here at these double pins. Again, coming up to my last pencil mark, try to get right to it. Okay, so to get ready to trim the corners, all you do at each corner is fold your seam lines together. Give it a shake. Straighten it all out. And just make sure it's nice and smooth. Now take a ruler and line your folded edge along one of the lines on your ruler, like so. And then the top of the ruler you want to align with the very first stitch of your stitching line. So I have it lined up here along the fold. There's my first stitch of my stitching line, and then I'll draw a line. You can use a pen or a pencil. I like to use a fairly fine point here. And I'll just pin this right in place. And this is my stitching line. And I'll sew right down my stitching line. And I'll back stitch to tack down. And I just go right up to the original seam line. And I'll repeat that on my other 3 corners. There's my seam line. Now I will cut the little triangle off, and I'll leave about 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. And I'll repeat that on the other 3 corners. Now I'll find my area that I didn't sew, so I can turn the blanket right side out. I'll just use my wooden dowel to poke out my corners, and you can see how pretty that mitered corner turned out. Continue on with the other corners. And I just flatten out the border, and then I wanted to show you on this opening here, all I'm doing is simply folding under this raw edge and just try to make it as straight as I can. Doesn't have to be perfect. Now I'll take it to the sewing machine and I will sew about 1/8 of an inch seam right along the edge of my blue border, and that will close up this gap, and it'll also finish off the blanket, and I'll go all the way around all 4 sides. I switched my thread to blue to match my border. Pull my bobbin thread to the surface. Because I don't want the bobbin thread to make a mess on the back of my blanket. Tuck that back. Now I'll bury my threads from where I started sewing, and I'll just knot the 2 threads together. And I'll just place that knot just above my stitching there. And this is a self-threading needle, and I'll thread both of the threads. And I'll just take my needle and very close to where the threads begin, I will reinsert the needle and I'll just bury it in between the 2 layers, anywhere, doesn't matter where. And the knot just popped right through into the layers. I've also made this blanket using 1 piece of flannel and 1 piece of quilter's cotton, and it turned out really nice. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.